Hey everybody, my name is Sam Pedro. In today's video, I will be talking about the book The Door into Summer, which was written by Robert Heinlein. And I'm really excited to talk about this book today. I had a lot of fun with it. I have a few thoughts I want to share about the book. This will be a spoiler-free review, just kind of getting some quick thoughts about it and kind of my overall impression with reading this book. And I will say this is a very quick read. It was very light in tone as far as a science fiction book. If you've been watching a lot of my recent videos or reading some of the articles on my website, you've probably noticed that I've been reading a lot more science fiction lately. And that has been a goal of mine, to read more of the classics of science fiction. It kind of all started when I read Dune in August. Yeah, in August, I believe. And I knew Dune was a great book. I've heard about it for years. I just never had the desire to read it. Finally read it and was blown away. You can go and see my review for Dune. But that kind of just carried the momentum going for reading science fiction. And so I wanted to seek out these classics of science fiction, maybe books that I've overlooked. And so I'm starting with some of Heinlein's. I've read quite a few of his books, but I wanted to read a few more of his, and also Isaac Asimov's books as well. And I read The Gods Themselves, which was amazing. Go check out, I think that was the last video I did. That was a really great book. But that leads me to The Door into Summer, which I'll be talking about today. And it's pretty interesting doing a little research about this book. And Robert Heinlein actually is quoted as saying that once he had the idea for this book, which came about because his cat it was in the middle of winter. They were living in Colorado, and his cat wanted to go outside, but every time he would open the door, the cat would see the snow and just kind of freeze and would, whine and go to a different door. And every door in the house, the cat would never actually go outside. And his wife made the passing remark that the cat's just looking for the door into the summer. And I guess that was kind of the catalyst for this idea of this book. And from the moment he had that idea, it only took him 13 days to finish and write the book. And I think that's amazing in itself. The focus required for Heinlein to just sit down and crank out a classic of science fiction in less than 2 weeks, and to create something of substance within that time frame. I struggle creating something of substance in 2 weeks, so definitely impressed with just the quickness that he was able to write this book. This is Heinlein's time travel book, so that is kind of one of the big plot points of this book, is that time travel is in this universe. And it was published in 1956, but the present day of the book is in the 1970s, and then it jumps around into I think it's the year 2000. So again, 1956 is when Heinlein's writing the book, and he's envisioning a world 15 years in the future and also 50 years in the future. And I always think it's interesting when people are envisioning the future and what could happen, what are their possibilities, and what do they think is going to be the great technological advances or whatever. And in Heinlein's world here, those breakthroughs revolve around robots or machines that basically replace kind of the mundane tasks. And so in some points, it's kind of more for like the housewife, like all the housewife chores and tasks from the 1950s. These automated robots can go and do all the things that 1950s housewife would have to struggle with. And so that is kind of the world that they're living in here in the future. This great invention that all these mundane little house tasks are all of a sudden gone. And the story's protagonist, his name's Dan Davis, and he's actually the inventor of these robots. But right at the beginning of the story, he gets swindled by his business partner and also his fiance, and basically it has everything stripped from him, and he decides that he would rather live his life in the future. And so he enters something called the cold sleep, which is another thing in Heinlein's future, which companies can now freeze your body and then awaken your body in the year of your choice. And so you can kind of just skip ahead to better days, or at least that's what Dan Davis's plan was. And so that's the basic plot setup of the book with time travel added into it. There's a lot that Heinlein can do, but I don't want to spoil it, but that is just the basic setup of the book. After reading this book, the biggest question I had was, is this a classic of science fiction? And of course, there isn't a definitive list of what constitutes a classic of science fiction or any genre, but I kind of struggled with this one at first because I compared this to other Heinlein books I've read, and to me, Starship Troopers, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and Stranger in a Strange Land, those just feel like classics of science fiction. They're big in scope, they're big in ideas, and so I think at first I was kind of thinking that The Door into Summer was kind of lacking a lot of that, I guess, that big in scope feel of these other books. Because in many ways, The Door into Summer is simple, but it's executed quite flawlessly. And so it's a fun read, it's a light read, but maybe that's the charm of this book, is that it's a great book of science fiction that isn't big in scope. And so I think that was my biggest takeaway. I think I will call it a classic of science fiction. I really enjoyed it. I think I even enjoyed it more than Stranger in a Strange Land, if you've read that book. I don't think it compares to The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, though. That's one of my all-time favorite science fiction books. But yeah, I think it holds its own. It's definitely different in tone, but it's lighthearted and it's fun, and I had a good time reading it. The other thing I want to quickly talk about is if this book feels dated. So again, this is a 64-year-old book. It was written in the 1950s. So of course there's going to be references and ideas that are maybe a little outdated. The future that Heinlein envisioned of 2000, so 20 years ago, didn't have any computers, didn't have the internet, but had these robots that were basically built to fulfill these repetitive tasks in our life, and which in some ways is kind of the computer. But anyways, even with that, I'm still a big proponent of reading older books. I think we can't expect every book to just fit our own worldview. I think we should let older books help aid in expanding our own view of the world. And so I love reading older books. I don't, even saying that, I don't feel like this really ever felt dated. I actually thought it holds its own pretty well. Even though it's 64 years old and some of the references are a little dated, I still think it's enjoyable and doesn't distract from the quality and success of this book. But that's all I will say about this book. I enjoyed it. If you're looking for a classic of science fiction that is a quick read, I think this is a very good one to check out, and I had a lot of fun with it. And hopefully you liked today's review. If you've read this book, let me know what you think. Do you think this deserves to be a classic of science fiction? How does it compare to other Heinlein books or maybe even other science fiction books? Very interested in hearing your thoughts and opinions about that. But anyways, thanks for watching this video. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next video.